Okay, so in this video we're going to go through this exemplar question from the Hodder Education AQA book, okay, which asks the most important reason for expansion west in the years 1865 to 90 was the development of the railroads. Okay, this is obviously for AQA HIS1K, the making of a superpower, from the AS, although you could largely change the essay by just assess the validity of this view, and that would make it apparently an A2 question. So let's have a look. Okay, so in terms of the introduction then, we can see that historians have had different views on this. The first is that settlement west just happened. There was no motive behind it. It just happened. Secondly, is to think about demography, okay, the idea of population, the size, growth, density, and that basically the first settlers arrived, millions more immigrants followed and reproduced at a high rate, and they needed somewhere to go, so they naturally went west. Another school of historians think about it as a deliberate policy by the federal government. During after the Civil War, basically trying to compare with the aggressive imperialism practiced by the Spanish, French and British of earlier centuries and try and take over the different areas. And others argue it was a special mission to bring the benefits of the American way of life as well as democracy and freedom, kind of the ideas of manifest destiny, okay, to take over. Or as a Turner thesis that talks about this as a kind of like a let-off valve of the pressure of immigration on America, the safety valve of going west. And the idea that for American democracy to work, the abundant nature and resources of the West kind of made Americans truly free. So this is what historians have said, and obviously not one of these schools of thought directly talks about the significance of the railroads, but clearly the railroads were significant to some extent, and that's what we're going to examine in this essay. So you can use some of the different historiographical views there, maybe pick one or two out or whatever, and then obviously talk about and try and link it back to the question. We've got nobody that really said, oh, it's the railways. So let's see if we're going to agree with the question, where that takes us. Okay, so in terms of agreeing, it was the railroads that caused this. I think it's clear that the government's keen to encourage railroad expansion to the west, leading to even more migration to the area. So in 1862, Lincoln signs the Pacific Railroad Act to create the first transcontinental railroad, which was completed in May 1869. And railroad companies were very good at advertising land for settlement of a kind of like bit of a package deal, as a kind of like a package holiday now, I suppose, the idea of getting transported over there and being able to sort out your land for you. And in 1870, the railroad carried 15,000 passengers, and there was 1 million on the railroad by 1882. By the 1890s, there's 4 other transcontinental lines, and this is taken straight from the textbook. They revolutionised the West, ensuring that a flood of people and goods moved in and an abundance of raw materials moved out. The railroads greatly stimulated the growth of iron, steel, lumber and other industries. So you can see there, in terms of agreeing, you've got to think about the possibility that the railroads created, I think, and the idea that without them, there wasn't the possibility for mass migration west. That's kind of part of it, and we can see that with the figures here, okay, on that line, that the numbers of people wouldn't have been able to make the way without the railroad. The fact that there was 4 by the 1890s shows that that's the case, and basically taking migrants in and then getting resources out is obviously a key industry, a key aspect of the railroads. So that kind of is why you might agree with it. Let's have a look at the other side. Okay, so the disagree side, okay. Now for me, this is not just going to be one paragraph, I don't think. What I'm looking to do here, and I've had a read through the book, is to draw out basically 3 areas that I want to talk about that are not to do with the railroad, okay. So first of all, the government deliberately brought in a series of acts to try and encourage people to travel west and to get set up as farmers. There are 3 of them there: the Homestead Act, Timber and Culture Act, both agreeing on 160-acre plots, but I suppose 40 acres had to be planted with trees in the Timber and Culture Act. Desert Land Act, as long as there was some irrigation, you can have 640 acres at $1.25, okay? By 1965, 20,000 homesteaders had settled on the plains. Cheap and free land led to the creation of over 3,000 bonanza farm, a farm of over 1,000 acres, okay? So you can see, even though that figure there is before, or right at the start of the period, you can see the impact that these acts were having, okay, and how they drove people there. At the end of the day, people are not going to go unless they've got the opportunity to get something that they haven't got back where they are in the East, if you will. So these acts encourage people and gave people the opportunity to get hold of cheap land that they could then farm and hopefully make their money from it. Secondly, you could talk about the second gold rush, okay, in the Black Hills of Dakota in the mid-1870s. The idea that an event like that drew people to the area to try and make their fortunes, and obviously at the massive expense of the Native Americans who'd been given the land effectively. But yeah, so that kind of chance to make something of themselves, that kind of economic money motivation certainly is part of it, okay. And then also I talk about the developments in agriculture as well. New dry farming methods enable farmers to grow particular types of corn and wheat, even when there was hardly any rainfall. Okay, there's an increased number of farm machinery to making reapers, threshing machines, binders, and combine harvesters, making possible wheat and maize farming on a colossal scale. We talked about the bonanza farms, kind of made possible by the machinery. At first, barbed wire as well, so you could actually cordon off an area and keep animals in it. And there's some phenomenal results here. It was estimated by the Department of Labour that it took 35 hours of labour to make a bushel of wheat in 1840. To produce 15 bushels of wheat, sorry, in 1840, okay? And not a bushel, 15. It took only 15 hours in 1900, okay? So this idea of producing an amount of wheat has massively dropped because of the farm machinery. Obviously, it's a boom and bust industry, really, depending on the crop, the price of the crop, and the export markets for it. But I think you can see that the government acts, the idea of a gold rush and the developments in agriculture really were pull or causes for people to migrate westwards. Okay, so in terms of the conclusion, of the most important reason for expansion west in the years 1865 to 90, is it the railroads? Well, in the introduction, none of the schools of thought mentioned focused on the railroads, but that leads you to think that they weren't significant. But clearly, that would be a bit one-sided, and you're missing the point, aren't you? Usually, infrastructure is essential for changes to occur. So if you don't have the infrastructure in place, like the railways, they can't. Things can happen. So perhaps then the railroads were the most significant underlying cause of the expansion west. There's got to be something of value, though, real or perceived, in the West to make people travel, and the railroad companies want to go there to build the railroads and get people out there. So perhaps that's why you can't say it's the main reason. It isn't money and the perceived better life that motivates most people to travel west, but it's the opportunity presented by the railroads that made this possible. There's no mark scheme at all for this question. It's the first year of the course. But what I've tried to do there through the two sides and the conclusions is give you a bit of an idea as to how you might answer that question. And I think the idea of an underlying cause here could be the way to put it together, because actually your railroad's only going to go somewhere if there's something worth going for. And clearly if that wasn't the case, then expansion west wouldn't have happened. But given that there was something worth going for, is it that railroads facilitated that and therefore are the most significant underlying cause, although not the main cause? That will be my answer anyway.